Okay. We're starting recording a couple minutes in because I forgot to. Quick recap. Moya was just saying that the students have selected one of the projects. They're going with the work context navigation project. Go ahead. Sorry, back to you.
Yeah, so we wanted to understand kind of like the developer process and how we could like improve, like streamline the workflow. We think that it's like kind of easy to visualize and we can kind of plan out like how we want to tackle the problem and see like impact we can actually contribute to. So we thought that the work context would be kind of like a better project for us as a team.
Cool. Well, you also have the benefit of the person at GitLab who thought it would be a good project to work on being one of the advisors on this. So that is helpful too. I just wanted to put in a plug. This is async. You don't need to do anything about it right now in this conversation, but do please like get back to us in some way. I think you could like say in, maybe I'll start a thread in the Slack channel where you can like reply, when it makes sense to you. But I am interested in like what particular skills you're each looking to like develop in this to make sure that we're helping you get some experience with those, get access to resources about those or whatever. So just put a note about that. Okay, and then you've got another thing on the agenda, so I'll turn it over to you all to run with that.
Yeah, so we have crafted like a list of questions for you all, and we are starting to kind of write a proposal, define our scope, understand the problem. So we'll start with the first section of the our question list where we're trying to understand the problem space. If any of you guys want to start.
And let me pull up the questions. I guess for our first question, if you could walk us through the current process a developer follows when they receive a new issue.
Sure. I mean, from my perspective as someone who gets assigned issues sometimes, it's usually like in one of two ways. Either you get pinged by someone in a comment on the issue and they say, hey, I think this may be relevant for you, or are you able to take this on due to capacity? So that happens for me pretty frequently. The teams that I support the most are the plan feature teams. So they're the ones who own like issues and epics and iterations and milestones, all of the like kind of like agile process features in GitLab. And frequently there will be things that are like, small UI bugs or something that one of the PMs there will ping me on and say, hey, I think this might be a good paper cut. What do you think about this? So that's a common way that someone might get brought in. I think if you're a regular developer working regularly in the team, this probably happens in the context of a iteration planning meeting. So like you're either synchronously or async going through issues and grooming them and saying like, yeah, I can take this one on. Um, I think that probably the experience in different teams is different. So you will benefit, I think, in doing some interviews with internal folks at GitLab if you want for this. And also, I think very importantly, like, we are not our customers. We use our own product in kind of a weird way, I think. We're not typical users of our own stuff. So you will definitely want to talk to like other developers who are individual contributors in teams that use GitLab as well to figure out how they're usually doing this kind of thing. But I think it probably varies quite a lot. But like, broadly speaking, like either you're going to just get pulled into an ongoing conversation or you're going to be there from the beginning or you're going to be kind of in like a purposeful, we are grooming this, it's getting introduced kind of conversation.
Yeah. So like one of our first steps is like we want to do a sort of task analysis or like workflow diagram. So we would, is there anything you could do to help us to connect with like GitLab users? Maybe like the first couple internal might be easier to reach.
Yeah. Um, I'll tell you what, why don't you write up something, kind of brief that I can share in an internal channel. So like, hey, like we just started working with our 2025 Tufts students, like they're looking for a couple like research volunteers. here's their little blurb, and I'll
Mhm.
see who we can bring in for you. Just, like maybe a couple sentences, maybe just one sentence about like what you want to learn from them, how much time it's gonna, like just like what they need to know coming into the conversation, and then
Sounds good.
I can connect them to you.
Perfect.
Was that just with internal GitLab team members? Is that what the goal is there?
I I was thinking it internal might be easier at first to talk to, and then like it would be maybe when we have something more very like fleshed out, we could reach to external. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Okay. Yeah, and then we can also give a heads up to the research team to like give them a estimated time of when you would need to talk to external users, so then we can just have them plan for recruiting, because that's the thing that takes the longest for
Mhm.
those projects is really the recruiting timeline.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if you are working on this, then I think probably the researcher most relevant to this is actually the user researcher who I work with the most often. Her name is Danica, and I've like a close rapport with her, so I can loop her in on this stuff. She's the user researcher in Plan. Um,
Gosh.
although also, Dasha, is there a research uh resource allocated on your team?
Yeah, it would be Ben Ludock Mills.
Oh, well. Ben's very busy, but I'm sure he would love to be looped in. Ben has volunteered with this project before, so he's got context on like what this is and how this goes.
Perfect. And for like future context, how long does it usually take to like recruit for external users?
It depends on your screener, like the types of participants that you're looking for this one, because it'll be like finding developers who take on issues should be easier and compared to other types of recruitment that we have. So I imagine like you'll be able to recruit within a week, and
Okay.
then and then it's just dependent on your schedules as whenever you can meet with the users at that point.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd say 1 week because it's just developer personas. And if you are adding more specific criteria to your screener, then maybe around 2 weeks. Based on my experience, like 1 week would be the average.
Mm.
Yeah, you probably will have an easier time recruiting for this than if you had chosen one of the CI/CD related or DevOps ones, just because there's like more people who are a developer who participates in a development team than who like sets up pipelines and DevOps.
Gotcha. Okay, so our second question, like based on your knowledge, what are some of the biggest frustrations developers face in their first moments with a new issue?
Yeah. So I actually I'll add a couple of other examples. So as you know, all of work is open and you can see everything that our teams do. So to kind of go a little deeper on what Chad mentioned, but maybe from more of a developer lens, as I'm usually the one who's assigning or at least asking the team to say, hey, can you pick this up? So this is an issue that I dropped here that is a little bit much. So if it's a little bit, I can always find another example. I'm going to dig them up from my previous planning, but think of it as there's always going to be this ongoing conversation before an engineer picks up an issue, right? Whether it's UX thinking through some of the discovery pieces, competitive ideas, and then you also have to think through collaborating with your peers in other areas. So an issue isn't just you, your product manager, and your engineer manager, and your UX designer, or even your UX researcher. You'll have a lot of opinions from a lot of other people at GitLab. And that is also the philosophy that we try to propagate to our customers. And so this is an example of an issue that spans multiple domains, but it has the core of it is we want to add AI to the terminal, as in if something goes wrong in your terminal, we want to be there to help. So you have input from UX from multiple areas, you have ideation from other engineers, and then Elwin, who is an engineer on my team, currently has this. And as he's looking through it, what does he get up to speed on? Because there's so many decision points that have been made already. And yes, like the top should reflect all the discussion, but sometimes doesn't. And that's where the mismatch happens. So if you look through this issue, for instance, and I'll try again to find some more examples, how do you get onboarded to this? How do you know decision points? Like what things are gotchas from an engineering side? What of your peers, maybe there's a staff engineer or a principal that has said something that you may want to take a look at, who maybe have more knowledge in the domain. So there's a lot of orientation points that an engineer has to do in order to understand the scope, but also what's been the conversation ongoing if they are just assigned. A good example, if they're coming from PTO, paternity leave, or maybe they're new to the team or new to the company, it's like, how do they know what's going on?
I think this is a good example because I just opened this issue and asked myself, what's the current state of this? And I just immediately started scrolling and reading all the comments and trying to figure it out.
Actually, so it's a lot of like reading at the comments, trying to see like who said what. Like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, because at the top, I like to have like a very simple format, as in like, what is the user problem that we're trying to solve? And then what is the proposal, right? And from product side, I'm not going to go obviously into implementation, right? I do the why and the what. The how and the when is a little bit more on the engineering side because they determine the level of effort and can get back to me on the estimate, and then also uh, engineer it. But then the conversation can keep going even as the issue is in active development. These issues are actually separate from merge requests where the actual code gets delivered. Oh, and I can do an internal shout out with my team to see if anybody would love to chat with you, because as have team members who have had to work through these issues, I think we can maybe find some volunteers on MySpace.
That would be great. Thank you so much. Let me see. Questions.
I can go into some other frustrations if we want to. Okay. So some of the other frustrations is, I think, understanding which kind of an example of MySpace. Sorry, doing a throwback to an old platform in MySpace. But one of the things are we work on different types of problems. So it's not always a very discrete problem where it's, let's say, hey, we're focusing on security. We want to make sure security scanning happens and it's effective, right? We can work on, hey, now we're doing terminal assistance. So whenever you want to see what your terminal is actually trying to tell you is wrong, how do you fix it? Or even, hey, we have an issue that I want to view in an IDE like VS Code. How do I view it? What does it look like? So because we span so many different spaces, engineers have to be almost like experts really quickly in an area that is new to them, potentially. So as an example, like we've had, my team has grown and we have engineers from other areas of GitLab that have joined. And it's actually pretty common with our customers as well, where you'll have one project and then there's things that move and then developers will come in and they're like, oh, now I'm part of this team. Like it's pretty normal to move people around in engineering and just internally. So as they're coming into the space, they have to know how are their internal team members are having conversations. And I think an interesting case to look at is what if they're not? Like, what if this is an issue that has no discussion around it? How do you know what's happening? Like, how do you actually go about it? That could be an easier, obviously, path. But if you're coming into a issue that already has a lot of discussion and has maybe already been picked up by somebody, dropped because of prioritization, how do you know where you are at in the process without having to talk to somebody who worked on it before? And I think, Chad, you've probably gone through this where there's issues that change hands so many times because things happen in life. And like right now, I have somebody who is having a baby. It's exciting. And we have to think through, like, what does that turnover look like, right? Who can we hand off this work and how can they really get up to speed on some complex tasks?
And usually, do like people do like documentation for that, or like you have to meet with someone on like a call? How does that usually look like?
Sometimes time zones are not forgiving, and you may not have all of the context. So usually we are very much into the async updates. So for instance, on my team, every single Wednesday, my engineering manager asks all of the engineers on their team to do an update on Wednesday to say, hey, where are you? Are you blocked? Can this be delivered, this milestone? Can I get you help? Like, please give us an update so that myself and Maverick can take a look and say, oh, gotcha. Like, we may need to push this out, or we need to get more information on this issue to get you unblocked. So there are those status updates, but in a perfect world, I think that'll happen very seamlessly and everybody will update. But there's so much information to share that I think it's hard to have somebody sit down and just write all of their thoughts and dreams for an implementation in one issue.
Yeah.
And I want to put a reminder that like this problem, I think, is something that we share with our users or anyone who works in a development team. The way that we address this at GitLab is not necessarily the way that our users do it. You know, like I think that a lot of companies work in a very synchronous way. We work in a very asynchronous way. So like, you know, the workarounds that we have internally for like how do we get everybody contacts and get people up to speed are probably quite different than like what our average users are experiencing, you know. So try not to basically when you work on solutions for this problem, try not to solve it for us. You'll have a lot of access to us to get information from us. Try to learn about the problem from us when you talk to us, but try to make it for our users because we are weird as users of our own product.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I think as a product manager, I'm very selfish at times where it's like, hey, what are these things that we can solve? But actually, it's a really good point. Whenever I'm chatting with customers around like how they're using GitLab, a lot of times they are using other products and maybe they're migrating to GitLab. So like Jira, Confluence is a pretty big competitor on like the plan space. And let's say they're using a different platform or they're using something like Trello or just a very basic Kanban board. How do they even move those things around into issues? That could really increase your research scope, but think through how do other tools or how do customers use other tools plus GitLab as well? Chad, Gina, I don't know if that's a good use case to even cover. Look to you on that one, but something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think, at a very high level, my understanding is that like the problem you want to solve is like people getting up to speed when they join a work item, let's say, a unit of work in progress. So it's a problem that everybody is going to have. You're not going to talk to anyone who's like, no, that's never been an issue before. And I think you're going to encounter really diverse ways of addressing that. But the challenge to you, I think, will be to find ways of building something into our features that can help with that in a generalizable way that works with different people's workflows.
Mhm. And then our third question is, what do issue summaries and MRs look like, and what are their limitations?
I added a screenshot just because we had that issue above of what the summary looks like. I also added a Reddit thread that has some external users like perspectives of how it works. But I'm looking for, there must be epics or issues that we have about like internal dog fooding feedback about that feature, and I just can't find them right now. So
There definitely are somewhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
we can do some digging on our side.
In terms of exploring how these functionalities work, the project that I invited you to in GitLab has access to ultimate features. So you can use GitLab Duo there. So you can like create an issue and like comment back and forth among yourselves and then like ask Duo to summarize the issue and that sort of thing. Um, as far as when you say MR, do you just like mean what an MR looks like or what a summary of an MR would look like?
I don't know I didn't write this question, so I don't know whoever.
Oh, I wrote that question. I guess it can be both.
Sure. So I can drop you a link to a merge request. They look a lot like an issue. They just have different stuff going on because basically the merge request is like a page that says here are the code changes that this person wants to merge in, and here's some discussion about it. And here are like some pipelines from CI/CD that have run against this and may or may not have succeeded or failed or whatever. So it's kind of a summary of like, here's all the stuff they want to do. Here's discussion about it. Like, are we ready to go or not? And kind of the ultimate like call to action is that like you want to get it approved, and then you want to get someone to like merge it in, someone who has the right permissions. So I can just like, I'll just grab a random one of my own merge requests and drop you a link to it.
I can also drop a more, not an overwhelming MR, just a more simple merge request that an engineer on my team just completed. And you kind of can see how we also do screenshots but again, to Chad's point, not everybody does this, as to how we demo and say like, hey, this is how this piece of work looks like and what is going to be deployed to production. Is this okay? And that's kind of where UX also takes a look. So I find my UX counterpart, Taylor, often in merge requests, working with engineering to kind of go back and forth and say, oh, that style is actually not what we want to use, or are we using the iconography from our design system or any other iteration? So let me drop that one as well.
And our next question, let's see. Sorry, we have a lot.
By the way, I think that the kinds of questions you're asking here probably will / should translate well to questions that you ask in user interviews as well. Like you're asking us basically like how it works and what our pain points are. Like I think you're already starting to do some detective work here.
And then what is the work context? I guess, is this feature primarily for looking at new issues that you're onboarding to, or is this scope also like supporting ongoing work that requires revisiting a context of an issue?
For me, it'll be both. At least that's the way I approach the problem, because both are happening at the same time. And it's never like, hey, this is the time that we have engineers on board. There's customers who obviously do whenever there's new projects or they bring in a new team. But I think both are happening at the same time in parallel, depending on the engineering teams or depending on the engineer.
Okay.
You can find, I think, from doing, I don't want to hypothesize here, but I do know there's engineers on my team that have done both in a very short time frame, like within like 2 months of each other. They've had to onboard to new information, as well as kind of also pick up work that they've put down and somebody else has picked up. So it's a lot of things that you may know, but then missed, and then you're like, ah, we're back to it.
Sounds good.
One other note for this, and you'll find this out the more that I think once you start running the research, you'll get an idea of how much data you're going to get. But you have a project timeline where you have to deliver in May, I think is when it's ended. So take that into account, where if you could explore both of those things, but like one of your outcomes of the research or of the whole project could be you should explore when somebody's going back into the issue rather than coming into a new issue. Like that could just be a next step for us to look into at GitLab if you don't have enough time. So just, yeah, make sure you consider the timeline that you're dealing with.
Yeah. Does someone want to take the next section?
Yeah, I can do it. So the next one is just like defining the success and of this project. So how do you like visualize the success look like for this project, and what specific key metrics we can track to determine whether this new system will improve the efficiency?
I think that is a question for you all. I think it's going to depend on what problem you're setting out to solve, right? Because there's are you familiar with the concept of like a double diamond process? Yeah, so you're in like the beginning part now, right? Where you're like going wide to try to like find what problem you're going to solve. Uh, you've got kind of like an area that was set up by the project proposal that Dasha wrote. I think when you say like, this is the thing that if we solve this, it will do this. That should give you clarity on what you can measure to see if you've solved that problem, right? So if you're trying to make it so that like there's like a measurable like it takes developers this much less time to like get up to speed or whatever, that seems difficult to measure, but just say as an example, then like that's something you can say is like a metric to look for to measure this. But it kind of depends, right? Through the process of like refining what problem you're going to solve and what your solution is, that should tell you what metrics to look for to see whether you've solved it well. You can't really put the cart before the horse with that, because he's like, you know what I mean? Like once you say like, this is the problem, and then like we think that this will be a good solution, then you'll know what to measure to say whether that really was or not a good solution. But I think this is an important question. I think it's just like TBD, and TBD by you.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But like, if you were asking if there are like particular things that we want you to measure or whatever, no. I'll refer you to one of my answers from last week. Like, we're not your bosses. We're here to help you. This is your project. Linda's your boss, kind of. Like, we're here to help you do a good job, but we don't have like specific requirements to put on you about this. The project proposal is like a launching pad for you to like dig in and find like a real problem to have like an impactful solution for.
Okay.
Just, I was gonna say, one of the things that I do really admire in UX is that stay curious and like see what you find, right? As in like, I think naturally you'll start gravitating towards areas that you are really interested in. I think I kind of maybe want to take the UX path in a previous life, but ended up here. But think about like what actually excites you about this problem. And I think that'll kind of lead to a discovery that's much more fun for you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you so much. And another question is there like any sort of constraint that we should keep in mind, whether in terms of technical or um organi organizational related to GitLab?
Was there, I forget if we said we were looking for like ideas of this outside of AI. Was that kind of like the purpose, Dasha?
I think I don't want to take AI off the table. Just to chat's point, I don't want to limit it as in like, hey, again, double diamond, if you're starting it, go wide and see like where it leads. But I would say think of solutions that are not AI driven. I think AI is a really fun space right now, but like how would somebody do it without access to Duo? So you also have to think about a GitLab customer who may not have access to Duo or AI because of security or compliance reasons. Like we have a lot of customers in spaces that don't allow AI. So those users don't have the benefit of like, oh, let me just push this into Duo and summarize this. Like, what do those users do?
I think that's a really good point, that like solving a basic user experience problem by making an AI do it in a context where AI is like a paid upgrade feature does mean that like most people don't get access to it. Now, that said, a little bit of inside baseball. If you think it would be helpful to you to have some design in your portfolio for AI stuff, like don't be like, oh, never mind, we can't touch AI stuff at all. But like, don't default to it, I guess, is I think a good point. But like if you want to put together some design for like, we also think that it could interact with Duo in this way, I'm sure, I'm sure that could also be a relevant part of your exploration.
Yeah, that answers my question because I was also supposed to ask if AI is something we should consider. So thank you for answering that also. And yeah, anyone want to take the next one?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take over. And we are moving on to also, is my mic okay? I'm kind of like hearing
Yeah, you're
okay,
good.
cool. Alrighty. So in terms of the general research that has been done, I think we touched on this just slightly a little bit last meeting, but can you tell us more about the like past attempts to improving this process and kind of what maybe were the outcomes of that?
To my knowledge, I haven't seen any user research, but I've been at GitLab for about only longer than a year. Longer than a year. Sorry, it's still morning for me. It's a little over a year, so I don't know if we've dug into this specific area. But Gina, Chad, on the plant side, do you know if there's any user research?
I'm not sure. I think this is something that if I connect you with Danica, the user researcher in Plan, that she may be able to speak more to. Um, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so our second question on this topic, were to see if there was any existing insights or user feedback on how developers wanted the context to be presented. I don't know if there was like any opinions that had already been expressed, but I also am kind of gauging that back to
I think
Danica. I
probably
think you
same
mentioned,
answer.
yeah.
However, I do want to say these questions, these 4 questions you have in the research chunk, I think these are good questions for you to find answers to. I like where your head's at with these. I'm sorry that we don't have very good answers to them right now.
No, yes, absolutely. Um, yeah, that sounds good. I think we can definitely, we were already looking into some of the other competitors too that you had written down in the previous
So
meeting. And
on
so,
4,
yeah.
I do have some answers for you. And this is something that Danica would also have like good information on. But like off the top of my head, some competitors specifically, I guess, with like our plan vertical. So obviously there's Jira. Um, there are some that we look at more kind of like for inspiration or whatever. Um, I think that the Atlassian feature set in general, like they have a product that they acquired called Trello that is also interesting more for like Kanban board stuff. Um, there's one that I have tried out personally. Sorry, I forget what the name of it is, but I have the app on my phone, so I'm gonna look. Um, Linear is one that we have paid attention to what they've got going on. There are some that are like classic like agile flow ones like Pivotal Tracker. Um I think these are some of the main ones.
I was also thinking about the ones we actually integrate with or we have an integration with. So ClickUp is something that we do integrate with or provide integration points towards, which means that we do have customers who use ClickUp and we're trying to get them to come to GitLab. But ClickUp, believe it or not, I know that it has multiple purposes and it's a very multi-layered product, but ClickUp is a popular one, as well as maybe think, and UTrack, which is a JetBrains product that developers also use, especially in the JetBrains space. And we have kind of how we think about them in the GitLab docs. So if you just type in ClickUp or UTrack, you'll be able to see kind of how we're integrating with them. And I think it'll have links to the actual product. Also, GitHub is the direct competitor, and you can see how they do issue summaries or how they orient issues a little separately than we do. I think that may be a nice case to look at GitHub. And I think Linear is a really interesting call out here, Chad, because they are very new to the market. So I'm interested to see, also think about like in the product maturity of where these companies are and how many users they have. Jira is by far the biggest. And then I would say Linear may have some of the newer users in market. So curious to see how these kind of older companies that have been around for a while are doing it versus some of these new companies in the market.
For sure. I think that's definitely a competitor analysis or market analysis to deep dive into. So I'm sure we'll get a lot of information once we look at all the different companies, but thank you.
Yeah, so we have a couple next steps. For this week, we will dive into the problem and scope and like do a proposal. We plan to create a task analysis to better understand like the flow of the issues and kind of create a workflow diagram with each users. And we will also try to talk to some users and get feedback on the problem. And we will make sure to send you the blurb so that we can start recruiting for external and internal developers.
Cool.
So
oh,
in
sorry.
terms of like recruiting external users, was there anything like we have to, what else do we need to do to like, get the process going?
So that was what I was about to ask about. I think that our legal department and Tufts legal department have finished the paperwork that would allow you to like access our internal stuff. I need to double check on that. That's a to-do for me. But I also want to ask you, do you know if Linda has been able to set up user testing accounts for you?
I
No.
think she mentioned it, but we haven't started like
Okay.
setting.
Yeah. So, you know, in the past, we have used our user testing to recruit for like unmoderated testing and stuff. Obviously, the first thing you're going to want to do is talk to people. So you're going to want to be recruiting for stuff that I don't really think would work with user testing. You know, we can do conversations with people internally right away. I think that we'll want to talk with Danica and maybe Ben about like recruiting for like actual like interviews when you've got like an interview script and stuff. And I think it will be helpful for you to kind of see some of the kind of the templates for how we put together scripts for those things and kind of go through that process. But I think the only limitation on that is I just need to make sure that the lawyers have finished their paperwork, because then we can say, yeah, here's the template we use, here's whatever, let me give you access to this and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we can get back to you about like the paperwork when we've signed it, or because I think
I don't think it's actually something that they, as far as I know, I don't think it's something that they have you sign anymore. In the past, it was like a direct NDA that the students signed or whatever. Gina did a lot of work to try to like get this settled last year, because I think maybe Tufts changed the way they want to do it. And I think now it's like a direct agreement between our company and the university. And then like we and you don't have to like sign anything individually. So like I was CC'd on an email from one of our lawyers to somebody at Tufts last week about like, hey, yeah, we're just waiting on this person to sign it. And then I don't know what the current status on that is. So there shouldn't be any to do for any of you about this. This is just like I need to go find out from them if like that process is finished.
And I do have a question about like the user interviews. Do you think it would be helpful for us like have some sort of diagram task analysis already made, and then we kind of walk through it to see like if they have anything else to add, or like just the interview? No, like what do you guys usually do think is better?
Let me ask you this. At this point right now, do you feel confident that you can make a diagram of a task analysis of what they need to do?
I
Your
feel like
the information for that?
we can only make a very like vague, like high level diagram, nothing very specific.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends, right? Your objective going into user interviews at this point is to learn about their problems, right?
Mhm.
So there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can, you know, you can kind of pull a Columbo and say, oh, well, it works like this, right? And then let them correct you and say, no, 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 it works like that. But like you could also just be direct about it and say, like, we want to know how it works for you. And people love to talk to you about their process. You will not have awkward silences. People, they'll just yap, 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 yap.
Mhm.
So you'll get a lot of information if you just kind of ask an open-ended question like, you know, what do you do when you like get assigned a new thing but it's already been in process and you need to get caught up? And someone will talk to you for 30 minutes on just that question, probably. So you can, I would say you don't have to prepare anything in advance to kind of like be something for them to react against to provide you information. You can probably just ask them an open question. Now later, when you are kind of developing a mental model of how you think this works in a generalizable way, I think that's probably a good time to test that model in this kind of way, right? To say like, here's kind of like a flow, and like we think it works this way. Where does your flow diverge from this or whatever? But you probably don't need to start with that. You can just start with like questions and just make sure you have a really clear sense of what you want to learn and what you want to get information about going into those initial interviews for yourself to make sure that you're getting answers about those things from the people who you talk to. But like, I don't think you need to like have assets to share with them going into that conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I fully agree with what just Chad suggested. And but if you still want to create like your own task analysis or a diagram just for you to understand and visualize the problem space, then you can just create one, but I wouldn't share that with the users. But maybe you can just translate those assumptions that you have with the diagram and translate that into the research question. Probably that's like how I would plan for the user research.
Mhm.
One other just like tip I figured I would share is one thing that I've learned over time is sometimes like the way that the participants will explain their answers to the questions. Sometimes I don't think, like, I assume I'm taking it away as different than what they meant it to be. So I'll often summarize what I think that they're saying and just like validate to make sure that that's what they wanted me to take away from it. So that's also, I guess, just a tip during the sessions. And in the past, I can share some examples of some Google slides that I've used just to like, it was a diagram of like prioritizing features, but sometimes it's easier for them to understand the question and like for you to get what you want out of their answer if you show them this slide of whatever it is and then like have them visualize it. But I could share an example of that if it's helpful.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
Also going to add a link to, I don't know if you have seen our plan and track work section in our docs, but it goes into detail as to everything from labels to time tracking. I can say, and my fellow GitLab team members correct me, I don't think anybody uses time tracking at GitLab, but that's also something that's there. But I can drop the link to the docs and you can take a look and see what you think is applicable. But it has in-depth tutorials, I think an entire, how would you use this for Scrum? How would you use this for Kanban? And then it even kind of breaks down the difference between when you look at an issue, what is a work item or a task within that issue? And then maybe you can even understand the hierarchy of like epics, issues, work items, and then maybe it'll bring the picture a little closer. So let me add that.
That would be really helpful.
In terms of timeline, we've got, sorry, I'm looking at a calendar over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more of our check-ins before your spring break. So I think that based on taking a glance at your Notion last week when we spoke, I think that you are all pretty on top of scheduling and stuff. But just want to call out that like it's probably helpful to you to like think about some sort of milestone you want to reach before you go to spring break. Actually, did you have something? You might have already even had something in there. I'm sorry, I'm looking at your Notion now.
Yeah, we plan to finish our research by spring break and start like the ideation process.
Okay, yeah. So you have week 2 as problem identification, week 3 as research, week 4 as research, week 5 something, week 6 ideation, and then your spring break. Cool.
Can you add a link to that? I'm just trying to navigate it.
Yeah, it's on our Notion board, like right at the bottom, but I can paste the link in there as well.
I don't have anything else. Does anybody have anything else? Otherwise, we can hop off a little early, save you some time.
I'm just gonna say in the Slack channel, if there's any kind of documentation that you want us to point to a GitLab, we're better traversing it. I think we just have a lot of bookmarks. I have a lot of bookmarks saved. So if there's anything like, hey, is there anything in the handbook about X, Y, and Z? We can easily just, drop it in there if we know it. Otherwise, you may have to do some searching and digging.
That is actually, I'm glad that you brought up the Slack channel, Dasha. Take advantage of the fact that like you can drop async questions for us there in between these calls. If you've got other things that you like want to ask us about or whatever, you don't necessarily have to wait until the meeting and like have an agenda of questions to go through in a sync fashion with us. Like if you're like, hey, I don't know, like I don't know what example, like can you guys link me to an issue that's a good example of blank? Like you could just drop that in the Slack channel and like we'll get back to you about it. Also, would you please, I pinged Victor, who was one of the people who wrote one of the other project proposals in our Slack channel and said that you all had some async questions for him. Would you please go in there and tell him like, oh, sorry, actually we're gonna go with one of the other ones and whatever, because I think he's like a little bit left on red right now with that.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else before we hop off?
I think
All
we're
right.
good.
Well, have a great week, and we'll see you asynchronously, and then in a week.
Bye.
Bye,
Have a good
everybody.
week.
Yeah.
Have a good
Bye.
week.
Thank you.